I love romance and I love horror. And I understand that that's a little weird. It's kind of a little bit of a contrast. I will not be pegged down and asked to pick a subgenre because I love historical romance. I love romantasy. I love contemporary. I love any kind of romance because I love love. And same with horror. I love psychological horror. I love the dystopian. I love any kind of plucking at these extremes. So maybe that's what I love, is the extremes of these emotions and the way that they can make you think. So it should come as no surprise that when I found that there was going to be a book event for Stephen Graham Jones, I bought my ticket right away. This came to my inbox. I saw it. I sent it to my husband immediately, said, "We're going, right?" Absolutely. And so it was put on by a local bookstore, actually 2 local bookstores, Legendarium in Salt Lake City and Under the Umbrella. And both of them are very inclusive. In fact, Under the Umbrella is a queer bookstore. And so it's kind of funny, this dichotomy of we are being hosted in a church, First Baptist Church in Salt Lake, and the event is being run by queer bookstore, Queer Spaces. And so it was a funny difference there. And then to take a step further, the proceeds from this night actually went directly to NAATSU, which is a health services organization that works with the Skull Valley Goshute tribe. If that weren't intersectional enough, they also had a pocket of ASL interpreters. And so this was about the most inclusive event I think I've been to this year, where they really did try to make it a space that was open to everybody and also a space that took care of a lot of minority communities. I just thought it was lovely. Again, if you live in Utah, it is a red state, and Salt Lake is this beautiful blue pocket. And so these kind of things mean a lot to me. I'll give you a little bit of details about the event, but I think more than that, I picked up on a few nuggets of wisdom, and I'm like feverishly jotting them down into my phone. I didn't bring my book journal with me because I'm a silly goose. We'll call it that. But these were a few things that I was just like, these are things that I want to remember. And so I'll give you 3 pieces of wisdom that I picked up from this. And I'll point them out. But again, I thought that the energy, beyond just being a representative community, the energy was really great. I was listening to these guys behind me, and they're just talking about books, and they're just talking about loving reading books and wishing they could read more. And then they start talking about this guy who's their friend, and they're like, oh my God, he's like a golden retriever himbo who just pounds books. And they were like, in the most positive way, they're like, God, I love him. And to me, I'm like, man, what a way to be talked about politely behind your back. But that's kind of the space that we were in, is all of these people just talking about the things that they loved, the people they loved sharing them with. And so it was kind of a treat to be in that kind of energy, especially in the world today. Need I say more? Stephen Graham Jones is about as cool as you can imagine. If you're unfamiliar, he writes horror, but it's almost like a literary version of horror because it's not gory and it's not over the top, and it really does make you think. I did a review on The Buffalo Hunter Hunter, and I thought that was probably one of my favorite books from last year that I was able to read. And so I've got a collection of his other stories now. The way that this event went, he comes rolling in and he's about as cool as you can imagine. He's got his cowboy hat and his leather jacket, carrying his cup of coffee in. The bookstore, the event runners, they had asked for questions to be submitted beforehand, either online or on Post-its. And then there was a local author and a few of the bookstore event coordinators who were up there who were taking turns asking questions. And so initially a lot of the questions had to do with, what inspired you, what kind of influenced your writing. And he was telling about this story. I really wish that I knew the name of this story because I was struck by it. He's talking about this story that his teacher in elementary school had let him read. And he's like, I don't know why they let me read this, but it has stuck with me ever since. And in this story, there is a kid who has this power who can see into the future 24 hours. And so when it is found out, everything that he's saying comes true. he's kind of given a place of prominence. And so they're pulling him on TV every day to share what the next 24 hours have in hand. And he wakes up one day and he does his little future check thing, and he realizes that there is a comet heading toward the planet. And within 24 hours, everyone will be done. Everyone will be dead and humanity is gone. And there's nothing they can do about it. He's seen the 24 hours, he's seen the panic and the lead up, and he just realizes that this is it. And so they pull him on TV that day and they say, hey man, what's coming up in the next 24 hours? And he says, it's going to be the best. It's going to be the best day. And he just gives them 24 hours of peace and joy because he knows that the panic won't lead to anything good. And he knows that that is all that he has in his power to give them, is just 24 hours of happiness before tragedy strikes. And I just couldn't help but think like, man, the contrast there is just lovely. He's kind of that person, right? Like the way that he writes, it's very contrasting emotions type of story versus the way that the story is told. If you're totally unfamiliar, and I think I've introduced his works already, but if you're unfamiliar, his kind of horror is, I would call it literary horror, in that, you know, it's a spooky story and it's told with influence of his Native American culture, but it's also not overtly horrific. And the way that he tells these stories often are actually, he uses revenge as a motivator for a lot of these stories. And he even said, is it revenge or is it justice? And, you know, he uses that balance a lot of through the different perspectives. Maybe I'm not seeking revenge. Maybe I'm not trying to hurt you because you hurt me. Instead, I'm trying to seek out my own form of justice to bring me peace. And so that is a guiding force for a lot of his stories. If I had to give 3 pieces of wisdom that he shared during the event, these would be the clear-cut 3. Take from them what you will. First one, he talked about the pace of his writing and how he, when given a topic or when he has an idea or when he's discussed something with his editor, and his putting it off and whatever, but when he comes to the end of it and he writes it, he says he does that as quickly as he can because it's really hard to exist within 2 worlds. And I think any author would tell you about that, about fully embodying the universe that you're creating and how honestly you could get lost in that. I think he was saying that the Buffalo Hunter, he actually wrote and fully completed writing within like a 10-week period. And for a lot of people, that's fast. Like if you're considering outline, story, characters, everything like that, and just compacting it into just over 2 months, that's a very quick write. And so I think that maybe there's some wisdom to be pulled from that in not dragging it out if you're somebody who is struggling to complete those kinds of things. But even beyond that, just in the importance of not getting lost in those worlds and to still exist within your own world and your own life. The second piece of wisdom, he was talking, like I said, his books are really like a literary horror. He was talking about the definition of literary that he was given that has stuck with him. And it is another one that's going to stick with me for a while. He was talking about it, literary defined as a funeral written in comedic terms. And the friction that's created between the type of story and the way that it's told, and how he kind of tries to do that within his own books. And so again, you're talking about horror, but you're talking about it in a way that's unconventional. I think he mentioned the Only Good Indians as a good example of that, because the final showdown is not a horror showdown, but is instead taking place on a basketball court. And so, you know, just the contrast between those. Why do I keep saying contrast? It's the only word I can think of. But really the comparison between these two very, very different things. I think the third piece of wisdom that he shared, this is the one that I think is the most relevant to both readers and writers. He was talking about the fact that art changes you. Like it or not, art is going to change you, and it's going to open doors in your head that have never been opened before. And so he had mentioned that he does not touch all forms of art, and you should be careful with the forms of art that you touch, because there are places in you that are darker or uncomfortable in ways that aren't necessarily great for growth. There are kinds of genres, kinds of horror that he'll even stay away from, because it just, what is the purpose of this other than shock value? And it's not going to be good for you. In fact, it could probably harm you. And so he just kind of mentioned the fact that approach art with that kind of caution in mind, because it will change you, whether you want it to or not. And then I think the most interesting in terms of what I've been talking about is that he said he longs to write a rom-com. And for somebody whose favorite genres are what they are, I just love that. There's something about men who don't fit into these genres that you're like, dude, you absolutely belong there. Dave Bautista talked about it. Dave Bautista, who was a wrestler, talked about wanting to star in a rom-com. There's just something about these guys who are so rough around the edges, who are like, I want love to be my world. And I just think that's lovely. Now, this book event was specifically for Night of the Mannequin. With my ticket, my entry ticket, I actually purchased a copy of this, a signed copy, as a matter of fact. This was published originally in 2020, and it actually has new art now. He was saying it didn't require edits, didn't require reworking of the story. In fact, it was just the new art. So redistribution of an older story. And it's a short one. Actually very short. I think I could probably finish this in one sitting. I brought one of my own books. So because I had purchased a ticket with a book, I was able to get one of my own books signed. I went with The Only Good Indians. I should have also brought my Buffalo Hunter. In fact, I saw this couple who I was like convinced that they're probably resellers, because they have all of his hard copies, and they had gotten in line and had him sign like 20 different books. It was actually insane and kind of like an abuse of the situation. I don't know, maybe I'm misreading it. Maybe they're just major fans and they just have all of the different editions of his work, but I just thought it was a little strange. So then I was like, well, why didn't I have all of my books by him here? Whatever. And then as we were in the event, they were also selling books, and I have been meaning to buy this. Every time I go into a bookstore, it totally catches my eye, and I just haven't reached for it yet. And so this was there, and so we got this one signed and personalized as well. I Was a Teenage Slasher. There's just a perspective in his stories that I'm so excited to dig into. So 3 of my 4 books written by him are now signed by him. 2 of them are personalized, which is kind of a flex. I'm just really excited, and I have now got renewed purpose in all of my bookish stuff. I am going to make it a point to really seek out these authors, because there's so much to be said about the way that they see the world and the way that they choose to write the world, and even just little tidbits of knowledge and tips that they can share that I think are so invaluable. And even myself, as somebody who's not actively writing at this point, I'm just, reading books. This is giving me a different perspective on just a few ways of understanding. I've mentioned in the past that I kind of struggle with literary fiction as a whole. And so now I can move into those stories with type of story, way it's told, and kind of appreciate that friction that's created. So I think it's just great that I was able to go and meet a professional writer and reader. Honestly, if you write, you also read. And so I met a professional who is great at this and who also has a lot to share about this, and it's going to now color the way that I approach literature. And so all in all, really great night. If you've never considered any of his books before, you're wrong. You should absolutely give it a try. That's the story of my book event that I finally attended. Shout out to me for going, and shout out to everyone else for making it a worthwhile event to attend. And shout out to you if you stuck around this whole time. Thank you for hanging out with me. I appreciate you stopping by.